What if there were a way to identify your potential diabetes risk factors, the level of risk associated with it, and identify what might be holding you back from actually fixing your blood sugars? Today, I want to break down more of a concept that I think is going to help to really break through some mental barriers, things that might be holding you back subconsciously from doing the things you need to do that you probably already know you need to do, and they're relatively easy. But there's one switch that I want to help you identify today. If you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Vandevect. I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist living with type 1 diabetes. And I want to share with you something that really stood out to me recently in my own personal life, but also with one of my clients and also with somebody I did a consultation with on the phone. So 3 different perspectives that I think will be really helpful for you as you navigate the complexities and chaos of living with type 1 diabetes as well. We'll hop into our theme song, and then I got 3 stories for you. All right, story number 1 of 3 for today. I had someone reach out through our email, and it was about our Warriors Tribe Plus launch. We reopen this periodically. It's this program we have. It's a paid subscription where our clients get access to hundreds of trainings and resources, whether it's challenges, workshops that we've done, type 1 diabetes master classes, expert interviews with leading industry experts, community coaching, just all sorts of stuff. Basically, we want them to have access to everything they could possibly need to see success and progress with their blood sugars. And a couple times a year, we open it up. And it's usually quite full, but we open it up periodically. And in this specific email, somebody reached out and said, I won't pay for anything until you've given me a bunch of free access to stuff to make sure it's worth it. I was like, man, that's kind of the whole point of this launch, is that we actually give you a money back guarantee where you jump in, you decide it's not for you, that's okay. No questions asked, right? But this person had such an aversion to risk, or I guess their imagined risk, right? Where they were like, oh man, I'm risking paying for something that I don't need or don't want. And the reality is that if it weren't helpful, we have this guarantee there in place, so that it removes the risk, so that there is no risk for people to try it out and see if it's for them. But I recognize this thought pattern in many individuals that I talk to. Thankfully, it's not common, but there are a lot of people that are impacted by this, and I've recognized it in myself at points as well, where risk feels scary. And risk can be even trying something new, right? It's not always a monetary thing. Sometimes it is, where you pay for something, you hope you get back what you paid for, or an equal value or greater value, ideally, right? Where you pay it for something and it's actually worth a lot more than what you paid. But we also pay for things with our time, with our attention, with our safety, right? And for me, specifically with diabetes, I know that a lot of the risk that I imagine I'm taking, because truth be told, some of the things that I think are risky aren't really that risky, but some of them are calling my safety into question. And that's actually story number 2. So I'll get there in a second. But one thing that I wanted to introduce is something that I've recognized in these consultations that I do, or in this case, sometimes emails, where people are afraid to take risk. And recognizing now, after doing this for many years, talking to thousands of people, those who don't take risk don't see reward, or at least not as great, right? And on the other side of risk is reward, and the greater the risk taken, the greater the potential reward is. And that if there is 0 risk taken, there is 0 potential for reward. If there is a risk taken, there's a greater potential for reward. However, it doesn't always end up the way you expect. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say, we'll use a business owner, because this is a common example, a self-made millionaire, right? You assume that person has probably taken some risks, right, in business and investing and whatever it is. And those who do not take risks do not make progress. So progress, which is what most of us are seeking, is on the other side of risk. Now, choosing your risks wisely is a part of the equation, but many self-made millionaires will tell you that it wasn't take 1 risk, get 1 reward. It was often take 100 risks, fail 99 times, but the 1 risk that worked so exponentially well that it covered all of their failures and more, right? But a lot of people have a hard time seeing that as a success. A lot of people see that and go, oh, but you failed 99 times. It's like, well, yes, but the 1 success you had was so enormous that it made up for all of it and still skyrocketed your progress, your potential, and your success far beyond what you ever would have reached without taking the risk in the first place, which would be zero, right? Zero risk, zero reward. So what's interesting and unfortunate is that those who are risk averse or who are scared to take new steps, try new things, even when it comes to risking the menu choice when you go out to a restaurant, right? How many of us have chosen the same food we've gotten for the last decade because we're like, I know I like that one. I'm not going to risk ordering something that I wouldn't like, right? And it's like, but what if the thing that you ordered that's risky is the most delicious thing of all time? And I've tried to make this more of a habit, but it is a hard thing to change mentally. But I do want to shift into where risk can be a safety thing. Because obviously, a lot of people look at joining something like a program, right? We have a coaching program, we have a coaching community, we have a lot of different offerings that help people with type 1 diabetes to live their best life, both with happy blood sugars, but also an actual quality of life where you're not living restricted by diabetes with all the rules and regulations and routine. You have to eat this food. You don't. You can have freedom and live with type 1 diabetes well controlled. My A1C is in the 5s, and I've had an above 90% time in range for over 5 consecutive years. And that's while training for Ironman, while raising a family, while running a business, and eating all the fun foods. I had pancakes yesterday, and I had a burger for lunch with fries and fruit. It's possible, but it did take risk initially. For 2 years, there was risk associated with my own research, experimentation, documentation, where I had to try a lot of new things, and it did not look pretty at first. But over the course of those 2 years, eventually developed what we call the 80-20 blood sugar formula. And now that's what I coach people in and help them to identify what needs to be fine-tuned to get their blood sugars precisely controlled that enables them to live their best life, right? But this risk that I've taken recently with my own safety with blood sugars, I'm actually in the middle of experimenting. So you talk about risk associated with joining programs, right? And to be fair, while we do reverse the risk of joining our Warriors Tribe Plus, right, and say, hey, it's a money-back guarantee. If you don't learn a shred of new stuff, if you implement and nothing works, let us know. Money-back guarantee. And granted, no one's ever asked for that because they always find something useful and they end up sticking around because they love it, which is awesome. But that's what the guarantee is there for, to help to offset the feeling of risk, because we want you to jump in and actually make progress with your life. But, coaching programs, there's no guarantee with the outcomes associated, and that's where the risk comes in. And people ask why there are no guarantees with a coaching program. And the reason is that I can't guarantee that you're going to put in the work, can I? I can tell you everything you need to do, but if you don't do it, you won't get the results. And if I guarantee your results, then it's a broken guarantee. So I can't guarantee your outcomes because I am not in control of your inputs or your efforts, right? So that's why there's no guarantees with that. But that's outcome oriented, obviously. No, but the safety piece, I took a risk and I hired multiple coaches for my Ironman training. I have one coach that works my workouts. I have another coach for nutrition. I have another coach for type 1 diabetes insulin adjustments. And I paid for this consultation recently where I trusted that this coach would have answers for me. And that's a big part of the risk as well, right? You hope the person that you pay has the answers. If you don't trust them and you don't pay for it, you'll never know. Zero risk, zero reward. And there have been some coaches that I've paid and had nothing to add. I said, you know what? That's part of the process. That's part of the risk. But I did pay this coach, hoped it was going to work, and my goodness, he blew my mind. Wow, can I pay you more? I want more help. And what's interesting is that the insulin strategy that I was given for my Ironman races was the complete opposite of what I had been doing. And it required that I step outside of my comfort zone massively. See, what I had been doing is letting my basal rates take care of the food that I have to eat while I'm biking and running and doing the whole Ironman thing. And it worked for the most part, but it wasn't optimal. And so this guy ultimately said, you need to get comfortable dosing pretty large chunks of insulin while you're exercising. What? And if you guys have been following me for a while, you know insulin plus exercise, at least in my experience, has been similar to like when the doctor says, okay, don't drink alcohol when you take this medication. these are things that don't mix, right? For me, insulin and exercise do not mix. I've had urgent low blood sugars in the past with this. So he tells me, oh, it's not just give insulin while you're exercising, it's give large amounts of insulin. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so nervous. Like, I actually told him, I was like, I'm actually really hesitant to follow your instructions. This is scary for me. And to give you guys some context, the last two times I did this, I took insulin to test this theory many months ago. And I dosed for 5 carbs, and while I was mountain biking, this was a podcast episode actually, I dosed for 5 carbs and I ended up having to eat 50 carbs, or technically drink. So 10 times as much. That's how much my insulin sensitivity had altered my insulin to carb ratio. Dosed for 5, consume 50 carbs, just not to go low, just to keep it balanced. The next time I tried this, I tried it when I was doing my Ironman training. I dosed for 2 carbs. 2 carbs. And I dropped 100 points. And to give you guys some reference, that is, 0.14 units of insulin. So basically a tenth of a unit of insulin. And I dropped 100 points. So this guy is telling me, hey, I need you to give multiple units while you're riding your bike. Units of insulin, if you're in range. If you're out of range, more. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. This is going to kill me. And so for me, I chose, because this individual is an expert in their field, as I expect my clients to listen to me, I listen to my coach. I chose to take these risks, right? And these are risks to my safety, and I recognize that, so I started small. For everything that I do, I start small for a couple of reasons. One is for safety, have a safety net where it's not a massive, irreversible decision. But 2 is I was fearful. I'll be completely transparent with you guys. I'm fearful of taking insulin while exercising because of the massive impacts that I've seen. So I started small, and I have found that exposure therapy is one of the best, most effective ways for me to move past things that make me nervous. So I said, okay, we're going to start by taking really small doses. I started with 0.2, which was technically more than I had taken previously, and it went smoothly. I came up with a plan for how to dose correctly. 2 days later, I said, we're going to double it. I need to get a lot further. Doubled it. It went well. 2 days later, tripled it. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so uncomfortable right now. But that's the point. Progress and growth is uncomfortable, oftentimes massively uncomfortable. And with the risks that we take, we open ourselves up for rewards to gain, right? And things can go terribly wrong, right? I could have taken those risks and it could have gone badly. But that's kind of the point, is that if you don't take the risk, you will never know. If you take the risk, you run the chance of seeing massive success. So we have to increase our risk tolerance, and with diabetes, of course, making it safe, right? You want to make sure that you are not putting yourself in actual danger. So I took precautions. I had an insane amount of sugar with me. I wore a backpack on my bike ride that has like 400 grams of sugar. Because in the past, I did see that I needed 10 times as much glucose to match the insulin I gave. So I was prepared, right? And there's ways to offset risk, of course, but you cannot avoid risk if you want to pursue progress. And that's been the key for me, is how can I take risks safely? And in previous episodes, I've also talked about dosing insulin thresholds, that most of us have a comfortable amount of insulin that we're used to giving. And that's different for everybody. But, for me, maybe I'm used to giving 6 units of insulin, but the food that's in front of me requires 7 units of insulin. Well, that might make me a little bit uncomfortable, right? So I have to find ways to reduce the risk associated with it. Maybe I split the dose. Maybe I give 6 units now and the 7th unit or the additional unit an hour later. And technically it's 7, right? There's ways we can manipulate this in our favor, but that risk reversal is something we can look for, but you cannot avoid the risk itself. And I think that's the key that I want to drive home today, is that if you expect to see growth, if you expect new or different outcomes, you must be willing to take risks, and they are going to be uncomfortable. If you're looking for guarantees in life, I can promise you won't find them. We don't offer guarantees for the outcomes of our coaching program because I can't control all of the situation that would enable me to give a guarantee, at least honorably, right? In life, you're not guaranteed to wake up tomorrow. You're not guaranteed to make it home tonight from work. You get in a car crash, right? Literally nothing in life is guaranteed. outside of death, I suppose. That's what are the two guarantees in life is that you'll be taxed and that you'll die. It's an unfortunate thing, right? But I think that's also what makes it exciting, because those who are willing to take risks are oftentimes rewarded a lot more. So this interesting point where I've taken risk, and actually yesterday went on a pretty large, no, it wasn't that large. It was like a medium workout. I did a 1.2 mile swim and then went for a 35-mile bike ride. And the homework was to give a minimum of one unit of insulin on the bike ride. And I did. And it went smoothly. Smoothly enough, right? I learned some lessons from it. I watched patterns. But the risk that I have been taking has produced new opportunities, new outcomes. And wouldn't you know it, the expert that I hired actually knew what he was talking about. So there are benefits to these things, but we have to be willing to get uncomfortable, to face fears, to take risks in life. Calculated risks, sure, right? But there is never going to be a guarantee. And I think that's one of the take-homes that I've had to have, is that if I want outcomes that are not common, I have to be willing to do uncommon things. I have to be willing to go and invest in myself if it's a financial risk that is uncomfortable, right? And I'm looking into different ways to invest for our future, my wife and I, our retirement, right? Those aren't guaranteed either. Stock market could crash tomorrow. We don't know. So there's going to be a risk, but if I just sit on my money, inflation takes off, that money is virtually useless by the time we get to retirement. We have to take some level of risk in order to see growth, especially growth in our finances, right? So there really isn't a way to get through life, at least not to do it well, without encountering risk and overcoming the fear of risk. And I think ultimately the lesson that I've learned is that imperfect action is one of the best things to do in life. And I told my wife last night, I said, one of the best things that I've learned at overcoming my own fears is necessity and micro overcoming of fears, or I guess exposure therapy is how I'm putting it, right? So the necessity is I have an Ironman race in less than 2 months. So I have a very defined timeline. I have less than 2 months to get this figured out, or that could be a very dangerous race for me. So time, I have to decide now. And this exposure therapy where every other day I'm adding more insulin, I'm changing strategies, I'm pushing my limits, is allowing me now to be at a place where even a week ago, I'm unrecognizable because I've grown so much in a week. So find ways to manufacture deadlines, right? Where me, I create deadlines, I announce it publicly, shoot, now I have to stick to it. And then find ways to use exposure therapy to take micro risks to build up your tolerance, because the more you're tolerant to risk, the more you'll take, the more risks you take, the more rewards you get, right? Now I'll give you guys an example from a story. This is our third story for today, if you're keeping track. And then I'll give you guys a little bonus at the end. There was a story that I heard, and I'm probably going to butcher it. I'm going to rush through it. But the idea is that there are these two siblings, and they were running through the woods. They stumbled across this massive castle, like enormous. It wasn't built for humans, right? They walk in there, and the door slams behind them. Locked. They can't get out. So they're scrambling, looking around. They find a hole in the wall. They go hide in the hole in the wall, and this giant walks into the room. They're like, oh, no. What do we do, right? Days go by, they're starving. They found a drip in the wall, so they've got water, but they're starving. And they see that the giant's eating dinner. And every time he eats, there's crumbs that fall on the floor. So one of the siblings runs out, grabs crumbs, runs back into the wall, munches, survives. The second sibling does that for a few days to rebuild its strength, but then realizes that there's a feast on the table. There's always leftover food. Maybe there's more to life than just surviving. Maybe there's more to life than just eating the crumbs, right? And so one day, this sibling, as the giant is eating dinner, goes out and calls out, "Hey, giant!" And he holds up a crumb. And the giant looks at him, and kind of spooks, right? Didn't know there's tiny humans living in his wall. And long story short, the giant, after getting over the initial shock of seeing a miniature human, decides he wants to take on this mini human as a pet. And he pulls him up to the table, kindly offers him access to the feast on top of the table, and this tiny human, or I guess, human, goes crazy. He just loves it, right? Then, because the giant has taken kindly to him, he builds him like a shoebox house, which is essentially a mansion for this human because things are, sized differently. The proportions are off. And this human lives life lavishly, like a king, right? While the other human who took no risk and wanted to hold off in safety and remain comfortable in what was consistent continued to barely get by, to barely survive on the crumbs from the giant. So the person who took zero risk, they survived, right? That's okay. And some people are okay just surviving. That's it for them. But the other sibling, the one who took the risk, where yes, technically the giant could have rejected them. The giant could have ended them. The giant could have, not seen them at all and nothing changed. There's a lot of different outcomes with risk, but because there was a risk taken, the outcome was so incredible that human, that sibling, ended up feasting and living life like a king for the end of their days. Two very different outcomes decided by one simple decision, where they decided to take action, to take a risk. And I think that a lot of times it does come down to one decision, one powerful moment where we decide to empower ourselves, take a risk, and believe in ourselves and our abilities to adapt, to navigate life that it doesn't have any certainty, right? Every day, we don't know how it's going to end. We don't know what's going to come our way. And it's because we don't control everything. It's a scary thing to recognize, but the more risks you take, the more enjoyable outcomes you often encounter. I will say, though, back to story 1.5, where I mentioned the millionaire, right? Many millionaires would tell you it wasn't an overnight success. It wasn't try hard today and reward tomorrow. It was fail, 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 progress. Fail, 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 progress. Fail, 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 success. Right? It's a process. It's a journey. For me, it was not an overnight thing, figuring out blood sugars and mastering them. Literally took me over 2 years of daily experimentation, research, trial and error, landing in the hospital a few times, right? But I continued pursuing progress because for me, it was a necessity. So if you decide that blood sugars are a priority, are a necessity for you to figure out, you got to start taking risks. Do so safely if you're doing it by yourself, or if you want to reduce the risk associated with this progress, find an expert, find a coach that is in alignment with your goals. And admittedly, that's not me for everyone. Some people have very different goals, and I'll point them in a different direction if we're ever on a consultation. But find an expert who is in line with what you're looking for. And a lot of people ask me what we stand for. It is not just blood sugars, even though I like to, show off all my numbers and, they've been in range 90% or above for over 5 consecutive years. Like I'm just always in range, which is amazing, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is the second half of that equation. While training for an Ironman, while raising a family, while building a business, while enjoying food, restoring my relationship with food, and focusing on my quality of life, because my blood sugars are so well controlled, right? So for us, it's a 2-stage thing. If that sounds like it's something that you're looking for, maybe we're the right fit. Maybe we can help. I don't know. I told you guys I would drop a link in the description for the Warriors Tribe Plus. I'm going to put 2 links in there for you. The Warriors Tribe Plus is your first stop, because if it's open for enrollment, which it is for a few days at the time of filming this, that is easily the best place to get your start. And oftentimes where alumni, people who work with me, go back to because of that continued learning, continued support, and accountability. It's just a beautiful environment, the community in there. The Renegade Warriors, actually, they all get these t-shirts. I mean, they're just a beautiful group of people. I love them. So that's your first stop, right? Warriors Tribe Plus, if it's open, jump in as fast as you can before the doors close again, because like I said, it really is maybe a couple times a year that we open it up. But if it's closed, or if you just would rather see if I'm a good fit to work with you based on what you're struggling with, see if it's something I can help with, there's a training that I made for people who are interested in working with me directly. And you can go to see that. It kind of introduces blood sugar formulas, the pieces that I discovered over those 2 years of painstaking risk and trial and error. You can go to diabetesinaction.com. I'll put that in the description for you as well. That one's a video that introduces the concepts, shows you what it might look like to map out more of a personalized blueprint with blood sugar formulas. And at the end of that video, there's a chance to chat with my team. And they'll let you know, hey, you should talk to Matt. He'll come up with a custom plan. Or here's some resources. We're going to support you this way instead. But either way, you leave those calls with something, some sort of a next step for you. And that's our way of supporting you in your journey, whether it's working with us or not. Because our goal, believe it or not, is for you to see success. If we're part of that journey, great. I'm honored. If we're not, I still want you to see success. Because I know how bad it sucks to have blood sugars just wreck a day, a week, a year, multiple years, right? And I don't want that for anybody. Someone who's had some pretty serious mental struggles in the past because blood sugars ripped the quality of life away from me. I don't want that for anyone. I don't want that for you. So we make sure that we support everyone who comes through those websites. So I'll put both those in the description. Either way, though, I want to encourage you, get uncomfortable, grow, seek progress. Understanding, though, that it will take risk, and that's okay. It's kind of the point. Challenge yourself, grow, and keep up the fight. That's what I want for you. Hope you enjoyed this one. Leave a comment. Let me know where you're at, and happy to see if we can help. Go plug away at those links in the description. We'll see you next time. And yes, keep up the fight.